DNC botches criticism of Trump's Middle East play. Reports about Harvard continue to raise questions. Social Security will run out of money 3 quarters earlier than reported previously. This is Dr. David D. Schein for Saving America with my own take on key stories from this past week focused on politics and business. This has been another week in America and the world with uncertainty and dissent, including some dissent from me. Chaotic situation in the Middle East. Now that the dust is literally settled, there are a lot of questions about Iran and its quest for a nuclear bomb. What we know is that Israel has done a great deal to degrade Iran's overall military infrastructure. We know that USA ran a very successful bombing run over 3 of Iran's nuclear development facilities. What we do not know is the level of degradation of its ability to make nuclear weapons. Some reports are that it is not degraded at all. Other reports are that there is damage and it may or may not be severe. Regarding a truce between the two nations, there's also in doubt because both sides have accused the other side of violating the truces. What else is new? The brief quiet could turn into another extended mess between the two countries. There are rumors that Iran would shut down the Straits of Hormuz, but that has not happened yet, and it may be unlikely to happen. Iran depends on the revenue from that passageway, which allows it to get its oil to China. Reportedly, this is Iran's single largest customer for the oil. DNC botches criticism of Trump's Middle East play. The majority of Americans do not want another Iraq or Afghanistan. The USA bombing runs ordered by Trump have handed the Dems an opportunity, but so far they botched it in royal fashion. Naturally, the concern is that the USA will get involved in another overseas war that costs billions, including loss of American lives, and will not end well. In fact, Republicans like Representative Thomas Massie have been critical of the intervention in Iran. Massie, of course, is also on the spot with Trump for opposing the waste in the big, beautiful bill, which has still not passed. AOC is calling for impeachment. This idiot forgets other presidents, including their beloved Obama, have been involved in ordering bombing raids without congressional approval as well. Further, how did those last 2 impeachment efforts by the Dems work out? Remember that old sage about insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. In the meantime, Politico reports that DNC members have referred to their current chairman, Ken Martin, as weak and whiny, invisible, and that his early tenure has been disappointing. Hard to recover when the leadership is not there. The majority of Americans support Israel. Having a couple whack jobs who somehow have been elected to Congress getting all the headlines while coming out as anti-Israel and anti-Semitic does not help their cause. The DNC needs to cut itself off from them and take at least the middle ground. Some strong leadership might be able to pull it off. But hey, Chair Ken Martin, windbag Jeffries in Congress, and washed up Chucky Schumer in the Senate, they ain't going to get the job done, folks. On top of this, the DNC recently announced they may have to borrow money to keep rolling. Meanwhile, the GOP says it's been doing very well on fundraising. Again, this should be a clear message to the Dems to change course. Reports about Harvard continue to raise questions. There was an interesting article in the Washington Free Beacon by Aaron Sabarium, which describes a report that the Harvard Law Review has been selecting articles based on the race of the author. In fairness, the Law Review insisted that the report took certain documents out of context. The headline claim is that 85% of submissions are being rejected based on a race-conscious rubric. Now, as an author with multiple publications and law reviews, the reality is that popular law reviews will have high rejection rates. So the focus has to be on the data in terms of which authors are being rejected. The report here was that Asian authors were being rejected since there were statements that some editors felt there were not enough Black and Hispanic authors. The article notes that Harvard does request diversity information on authors who submit articles to them. The amazing statistic is that the Free Beacon identified 87 cases where the Harvard Law Journal considered projected traits or encouraged its members to do so. A quote was that in one case, editors complained that a piece had cited a lot of old white men. The Free Beacon research notes a large number of examples. Again, a selective law review can certainly cull the submissions, and that is not the issue. The issue is whether the culling is being done for racial or ethnic reasons and not due to the quality of the writing or the contribution the article makes to legal scholarship. In my opinion, these should be colorblind decisions. If Harvard was exclusively funded privately, this might be their call. However, details continue to flow that Harvard receives huge amounts of public money and is not a taxable entity. Therefore, the government can insist that the public monies are not being used to promote a discriminatory viewpoint. China attacks Philippine ship in Philippine waters. With all the focus on the terrorists in Iran, it pulls some of the focus off the big threat, the CCP. I am always careful to point out that my concern is not with the people of China, but with its corrupt and terrorist communist leadership. As my audience knows, I am not happy at all about the recent tariff compromises in negotiations with the United States. I expect the CCP will continue to cheat, and the USA may lose its focus on abolishing the CCP the way the Soviet Union was shut down around 1990. The latest in a long-running battle are military threats against some of China's neighbors. The idea is to claim for China lands that already are claimed by another country. A CCP ship recently tried to drive a Philippine ship out of waters claimed by the Philippines for 300 years. The CCP is trying to claim all of the South China Sea despite the historic claims by all of the surrounding countries. My understanding is that an irrational tribunal rejected China's irrational claims in 2016, but the Chicoms ignored the court ruling and began harassing ships from other neighboring countries. Other concerns about the CCP that came to my attention includes a Chinese company paid $67 million to set up a water plant in New Hampshire. The news report from NTD was triggered by a report by Lily Tang Williams, a Republican congressional candidate in New Hampshire's 2nd District. She is a survivor of Mao's Cultural Revolution. Remember that production number reportedly cost 50 million Chinese their lives. And to round things out, the unthinkable, a former U.S. Army sergeant faces up to 10 years in prison after he pleaded guilty to offering key U.S. defense secrets to the CCP. As I have said before, I favor much greater penalties like life in prison and the death penalty for traitors. Social Security trustees report now say it will run out of money 3 quarters earlier than reported previously. This is not necessarily new news, but only that due to the incredible stupidity of a recent act to grant even more benefits out of that depleted SSA fund, it is now projected to run out earlier in the year 2033. Again, the big hit would be that every Social Security recipient would have a huge 1/3 reduction in benefits at that point. In my article in American Thinker in summer 2023, I called Social Security the world's largest Ponzi scheme. That is because both political parties in DC have spent the incoming Social Security withholding and did not set it up to gain interest and pay benefits like a private pension plan is required to do. One fix is to stick it to everyone still working. The numbers work like this. DC could raise the withholding by 3.65 percentage points from 12.4% to 16.05%. That would mean a $2,400 tax hike amounting to a total of $10,700 paid to Social Security each year for the average worker earning $66,600 per year. Note how regressive that would be. This would be devastating and certainly not appropriate. On the other hand, the U.S. government could cut its spending and pay back all the money it has stolen from SSA over the decades. That is why, despite the recent bad publicity, I still support DOGE, or at least the concept of it. It is time to cut, cut, and cut. Here are some of my proposals. An intelligent reduction in force, RIF, of at least 1/3 of all federal employees. This includes the military, not the sloppy RIF that Trump and Musk ran earlier this year, much of which is still in the courts. Number 2, total elimination of federal pensions. Less than 10% of the private sector has pensions. Time for the so-called servants to have the same as us, a savings plan. Cut wages and benefits to match the private sector. No more excessive vacations and holidays. Elimination of civil service job protections. The vast majority of the private sector in employment at will jobs. Why should the Fed employees have a different deal? Implement my proposed cut to this postal service dramatically in terms of delivery days and jack up the cost of bulk mail to where it belongs. Eliminate uncompetitive overnight delivery, which the USPS cannot do effectively. I believe with these steps, America would then be able to meet its obligations for Social Security, Medicare, and previously promised federal pensions. Write to your local representative or senator if you agree with the Dr. Dave plan to save America. A majority of Americans back RFK Jr.'s MAHA effort. A timely article by Charlie McCarthy of Newsmax provided an update on one of the more controversial picks of Trump's second term, RFK Jr. Of course, he was made head of Health and Human Services. For the record, I'm not a big fan of his. Many of his views are far too left for me, but I am a self-proclaimed health nut, and I too agree with his move to MAHA, Make America Healthy Again. The article cites a new Axios Ipsos survey that nearly 9 in 10 Americans want it to be easier to understand food safety guidelines. About the same want assurance of food safety, including adding labels to foods with artificial dyes or reducing exposure to pesticides. 56% said chemicals or unsafe additives in food are a large or moderate risk to their health, and 41% they feel the same about eating or drinking things with food dye. 67% do not trust the FDA approvals, and that's very significant to me. In recent weeks, tourists have damaged 2 works of art in 2 different museums, both happen to be in Italy. On display in the Palazzo Maffi Museum in Verona, Italy, there is a chair on display by Italian artist Niccolo Bolla. It is called Van Gogh's chair since it was inspired by Van Gogh's 1888 painting, which depicts a simple wooden chair positioned on a tile floor. The artist's interpretation, about 20 years old now, is covered with hundreds of Swarovski crystals. A couple waited for the staff to leave that room and, ignoring the museum's marking, sat in the chair while the other took a picture. The museum has video of the result when the man sat in the chair and it collapsed. The only good news is that the museum was able to restore the chair. And a different moron tourist fell against an 18th century painting while taking a selfie. This was in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, Italy. The painting is a 1712 portrait of Fernando de' Medici, Grand Prince of Tuscany, by Antone Domenico Gabbani. It sustained a small hole near the bottom when the moron stumbled backwards after tripping on a platform designed to keep people away from the painting. The good news here is that the damage is considered light and the artwork is expected to return to display soon. Many in my audience know that I am a big fan of art and I want great pieces to be available for our future generations. Reflecting on both cases, there's a concerning trend with careless tourists and folks taking selfies with little regard for the valuable artwork. So please be careful when visiting museums and historic places. This is Dr. David D. Schein. Thanks for joining me for this special edition of Saving America. Remember, a new Saving America show is aired on the Brushwood Media Network every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Listen on any of the 16 network stations, Apple or Google mobile app, Apple CarPlay, TuneIn, Smart Speaker, and all smart TVs. Find more information at the brushwoodmedianetwork.com. Please be sure to join us each week. We welcome and love your feedback from our growing audience.